in for Senator Shelby, which makes me a little uncomfortable, but I will perform that duty. And my initial reaction to this legislation was to be very supportive. You mentioned Envision Utah, and if I might be a little bit parochial here, Envision Utah is a group that was formed primarily out of the private sector to ask the fundamental questions you discussed in your opening statement. What are we going to do? In the time I've been in the Senate, Utah has added 1 million people in population. Now, they might not notice that in California, but in Utah, that's a 50% increase, as we've gone from roughly 2 million to 3 million. And since we have the highest birth rate of any state in the union, plus in-migration, someone once asked the governor of Utah, what's the best economic development agency you have in Utah to attract business? And he said, it's the California State Legislature. We have all kinds of people moving in. We have all of these problems, and as you've suggested, our population is somewhat jammed in between the Great Salt Lake and the Wasatch Mountains. So we're one of the most urban states in the Union. And the group of people got together on their own. The business people started it. Government came in almost after the fact, but they were involved, and asked all of these fundamental questions. And we do recognize that coordination of transportation and housing is essential, and there are many, many things in this legislation that I strongly support. And if I can draw a parallel to it in another piece of legislation with which we're all familiar, it reminds me a little of No Child Left Behind. I came to the Senate having focused on education issues, and when I first heard about No Child Left Behind and the efforts that were going to be made, I thought, this is great. This is what we really need to do. And then as I watched it move its way through the system, by the time it came to the final vote, I looked at what was happening in Utah and what No Child Left Behind would add on in the way of additional and redundant kinds of requirements. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't vote for this. I'm one of, what, 9, 10 senators who didn't vote for No Child Left Behind. And there are things in this legislation that, being very parochial about it, in my view, would get in the way of what we're already doing in our state. And so I will reluctantly vote against it here in committee. I recognize things can change, and I'll be open to conversations with you between now and the floor, because I think the direction that you're trying to move is very, very wise. I think the overall philosophy you've adopted is very wise. And I apologize that I had other things to do while you were crafting it. That prevented me from having the kind of input that maybe I should have had if I were going to complain now about the final product. But I will be voting against it, and I have instructions from Senator Shelby and the other Republicans to vote their proxies. So we're ready to proceed on this side. If Senator Vitter is.
Well, let me see if there are any more opening statements. Go back and forth, and I'll come to David in a minute. Senator Johnson.